I love your home already, and I haven't even seen it. Does that sound crazy? It's not. When we improve our surroundings, we simultaneously empower ourselves, which means every inch of space within your reach right now is an opportunity to tell the story you want to be living. Tell me that's not its own kind of wonderful. I have spent the last 15 years consulting clients and their homes through the wisdom of feng shui, intentional design, and some crystal clear communication. And you know what happens when you bring those three together? Life-changing magic. Your home is already in a conversation with you, so why not learn how to merge that awareness with some simple, straightforward, and smart action to co-create the life you want? I'm Amanda Gibby Peters, and I am here to help you learn how. Welcome to House Therapy. Hello, Sunbeams. So I'm really excited about today's topic and focus, and that is you. As in, we're spending this whole episode answering your questions. So much of what I've learned over the years didn't come from a book or a little outline of topics in coursework. My fluency and instincts have really developed and strengthened through conversations. Conversations with clients when I have to come up with solutions that actually work for them, conversations with other practitioners and hearing how they're interpreting solutions and adjustments in their own consulting practices, and then conversations I've been through just on podcasts and in workshops and definitely teaching my own courses. And all of this is to say, we learn so much more when we're exposed to situations and challenges that aren't necessarily ours. So even if today's cues don't feel immediately relevant, lean in and listen, because inevitably some nugget of wisdom within our conversation today will be useful later. Okay, so our first question. One thing I wonder about is how long a cure is good for. If you do one, does it go stale? This is such a great question. And the answer is, it depends. How's that for ambiguous? But before I answer more specifically, I just want to clarify something. There are two terms that I will use around here that might seem interchangeable, but in fact, they have different roles, especially when we're talking feng shui. So let's talk about that quickly. A feng shui cure or remedy is a strategy to intentionally alter some challenging energy or presence around you. It doesn't necessarily cure a problem, but it empowers us to confidently and definitely with more ease work through situations instead of feeling like that challenge is working against us. A feng shui enhancement is an energetic improvement. It's sort of like widening your receptivity to auspicious opportunities and possibilities. Enhancements often help us just feel better, so we're more likely to see and align ourselves often effortlessly with positive experiences and, again, opportunities. So to go back to the question, the answer really lies in what is the cure you're working with doing? So a few examples. Let's say you've put something in place to mitigate the effects of something unwanted or challenging outside your home. Maybe your house is at a T intersection or you have like a busy road behind your home. These are chi challenges that are beyond your control, right? So when I recommend a cure for these, that will usually stay in place until the challenge resolves. And usually in these situations, they don't, right? So it'll stay in place until a client moves. So I like to think of these remedies as becoming part of the infrastructure of your home. Now, in another situation, maybe the cure is placed to help resolve something that can be influenced or energetically affected. So maybe you have like a difficult neighbor and you put a remedy in place to protect yourself from that energy exchange. And let's say after the remedy is implemented, the neighbor moves a short while later. I would recommend moving that remedy so that you're open to a better neighbor assuming the space next. And when I say move, I mean removing it. And instead, maybe amp up that area now by placing something really lovely somewhere in that shared space so that you attract something better in that space. Now, some remedies will go in place, but they will require refreshing. And one of those that immediately comes to mind is coins in a red envelope under the doormat. I shared a link in the resource notes below so you can learn this remedy if it's brand new to you. But in this remedy or cure, the red is symbolic of power and strength. The coins inside the red envelope suggest money. And by placing this under a front doormat, you've got this 1-2 duo that really encourages money to walk into our lives. However, the reality of this entire setup is the coins are going to degrade over time. The envelope is going to erode, thin, wear out. So it's really a good idea to find a rhythm for updating the remedy, maybe every new moon, perhaps with the start of a new season, maybe once a month. Whatever works for you works for me. And then finally, in some situations, remedies and cures and enhancements will be prescribed for a certain amount of days. When it comes to feng shui, usually it'll be 9 or 27 days because those are power numbers that are associated with manifestation. If the remedy or enhancement suggests a timeline, then that's your guiding system for how long it stays out. All right, excellent question. Let's now go on to question number 2. How can I do feng shui on my property to bring good energy to my neighborhood? This is another fabulous question. So when we first start engaging feng shui practices and perspectives into our homes, we're working usually with our immediate surroundings. One of my earliest teachers explained it like this: your house is the gem of a ring. And as beautiful as it is, the setting is equally important to that gem, right? It's like supporting and protecting it. And in this analogy, your property is that setting. Even more significant, when you start to look at your property, this land chi that is around you, it is influencing your home all the time. And it is actually way more important than we are often led to think. So by being the first ripple into generating positive chi out from your space and your property, you will subtly influence others to follow suit. And that is a win for everyone. And in case that sounds too Pollyannish, I want to share a quick story that I read in the book Joyful by Ingrid Lee. I shared that link in the notes below too. So the setting is Albania, where a recently elected mayor has decided to paint, and I quote, a historic building in a shade between tangerine and tang. Now, as Lee explains in her first chapter, aptly titled Energy, the mayor inherited a city that had been broken by decades of repressive dictatorship and really starved for resources. So the painted buildings were actually an act of desperation to just disrupt some of that bleakness of the landscape. But here's the magic. Shortly after the painting, strange things began to happen. And I'm quoting here now. People stopped littering in the streets. They started to pay their taxes. Shopkeepers removed the metal grates from their windows. They claimed the streets felt safer, even though there were no more police than before. People began to gather in cafes again and talk of raising their children in a new kind of city. Nothing had changed except on the surface. A few patches of red and yellow, and yet everything had changed. The city was alive, ebullient, joyful. Okay, so one improvement there had a wide power of persuasion. So I'm telling you the story so you don't underestimate your power of influence either. And with that, to answer your question, here are some considerations for you. Now, most of my groupies will attest that one of the first notes that I make when approaching a home is the land quality itself. Neglect of a yard or property is one thing, the struggle bus is another. So if there is vegetation or landscaping that is truly struggling to grow and can't thrive, this is going to indicate to me that there is probably some similar struggle happening to my clients and possibly even in the neighbors' lives, depending on the stretch of that struggle. Another big indication for reading land chi is, how does wildlife respond to the area? Do birds come? Are there critters? Like, what's the wildlife situation happening? So when I start to kind of look at that and I see an opportunity perhaps to what I call plump up the chi, here are a few things that I recommend that can make a really big difference. One, composting and fertilizing the soil. If the soil around your house is healthy and lush and producing life, you really are in the best hands possible. In fact, practitioners of old, feng shui practitioners, weren't taken seriously unless they had soil underneath their fingertips. They would often taste the soil to know if it was healthy and replenishing. So, composting, fertilizing the soil, and then taking care of the landscape you've got. So if anything is rotting or dying or even struggling and you don't know how to bring it back to life, remove it. Because over time, that can really amplify or intensify struggle, bad health, financial problems, anything like that will create challenge in your space. If your greenery is overgrown, know that it's consuming life chi from you, okay? Plants and trees are great for a space until they take over. So think about it. They're these living, breathing energies, and they need to consume energy to keep growing, right? So they will extract it from the property, out of the house. They'll just siphon it from wherever they can. One of the most exhilarating and exhausting situations for me as a practitioner is driving up to a home, seeing a yard that desperately needs pruning and trimming and manicuring, and knowing here's a really simple solution with big wins on the other side, but the clients want to leave it the way it is. So my suggestion is, start with a small section. Do something, change it, clean it up, like I said, manicure it, and then pay attention to what happens. We live in a vibrational universe, and when you start making changes, you're guaranteed energetic feedback. And a lot of times you're going to be tempted to think that it's a coincidence. So if your coincidences start increasing after you make some changes, let that be the energetic feedback that you're getting, okay? So having light around your property is another great way to feng shui outside. Either solar lights leading up the path to your door, or lighting on the house, say around the garage or the porch, or even having spotlights on the trees or the shrubs or anything that's in your yard. Not only will this energize and amplify the garden chi, it helps also eliminate negative energy. And if you're in a space that feels really heavy or like the challenges are chronic, I want you to consider placing 4 lights pointing up at all 4 corners of the home, and this will energetically give the entire space and all of that chi a lift. I mentioned at the beginning that I pay attention to kind of the wildlife, the bird situation, the critters outside. So if you can, encourage life to visit and stay a while. Birds, squirrels, all of that living energy is vibrant chi, and if they're coming around, that's a really strong signal that your land chi is working in your favor. So a few ways to do this. You could start a birdseed bar, really, it's just a birdhouse. Birds are super powerful symbols of opportunity, so staying in their company is a great way to attract financial opportunities, good news, good business, career luck. Basically, if you put a birdhouse up and they keep coming back, it's like Lady Luck has moved in with you. If you don't want that kind of maintenance, or that's not something that you have access to, you can buy a bag of birdseed and just make it a ritual to sprinkle the seed along a path to your door. So while you're doing this, you can intentionally call forth whatever opportunities or collaborations or business or synchronicity it is that you're looking for. And then my last suggestion is to add some movement to the space. So if you've been a client or a groupie of mine, you know how much I love a wind chime. Well, movement can be implied and added with any decorative feature that allows movement. So think a flag, a windmill, a weather vane, prayer flags, a windsock, or wind chimes. So I had a teacher who called wind wild grace. And essentially the idea is that this is abundance that's available to you all the time, right? It is replenishing without ever really diminishing, right? So as this moves across your property and you see the movement of any of the features I just mentioned, it really reinforces that idea of abundance is here, that replenishment without diminishment. And it creates a very welcoming environment for those who live here, anyone who's visiting, and those who are in the area living nearby. Okay, so we've got one more question for this episode, and it is, any feng shui advice for a child's playroom? This is a great question. So rooms, whether they're for sleep or play, are our children's first declarations of self-definition. It's this wide open space to express who they are. And more importantly, it's an opportunity for them to reflect who they dream of becoming. And when we get to spend time in surroundings that we love, it really inspires us to use our imaginations. It allows our personalities to show up in full strength. So here are just a few considerations for your kiddos' stomping grounds. First things first, our littles are wide-eyed and just digesting so much new information all day long because think about it, the world is a brand new experience for them. So from their perspectives, it is really big out there, sometimes alarming, but certainly reprieve worthy. The one constant in their lives is change, right? Because as you learn more and you know more, you start to see things differently. So their natural instincts are going to be to self-soothe by creating nests of their own. And usually what I see, these are the stuffed animals, their little birthday party treasures, all the promising trinkets that they pick up at school or when they're at the store, or what family and friends give them. And while their collections might seem like clutter to us, it can be how they're nourishing and nurturing their systems and souls. So instead of editing through their things, I would recommend to begin having regular conversations with them about their stuff. I find that this is really important because when we start to learn to have conversations about our things, we don't need to rely on them for confidence. So a good rule of thumb, everything has its own place, even the homework, right? So help them learn to strike a balance between their creative expressions with a few house rules that are your non-negotiables, right? And when you do this, when you effort to have this conversation, and I know when they're young, it is a struggle, but if you do this, if you kind of make order a priority now, it will provide you so much more convenience later when they're teenagers. Okay, now, because I love a good multitasking decor conversation, here are a few other ideas worth taking for a mental whirl. So we all want an inside advantage for our kiddos' scholarly successes, right? A really great thing to round out their rooms, playroom or bedroom with, is a globe. These really encourage curiosity. Cosmic charts of the moon and the stars or the earth will also give them a sense of endless horizons. And any world map will kind of allow them to step into that full potential energy that we really want them to get comfortable with. The next thing that I want to mention is if your kiddo has a desk, you want to make sure that it's a just right size. This really is sort of a Goldilocks situation. If a work area is too big, your kiddo might not fill up to the task in front of them. And if the desk is too small, it can leave them feeling stymied and kind of like held back. So think of the desk as potent creative space and as a place where you can both seize the day, but then also playfully unwind. And by the way, this is true for us adults too. So make sure your desk is just the right size. Another thing that is fantastic in rooms, playroom or bedroom, are photos of parents and grandparents. Visions of love are just so reassuring, and it's a beautiful reminder of your child's place in a family. And all of those objects of affection that they collect. So again, the stuffed animals, the curated artifacts, the artwork, these are all punctuations of self-expression and comfort. So find a way to organize those or allow those in the space so that they can have that reassurance to steepen when they're in their rooms. Another suggestion I have is green is a really great color for improving self-acceptance and nourishing self-esteem. And it doesn't have to be all green. It can just be an accent color. But it's a great color I find when kids have scattered energy and they need help focusing and concentrating. And it can be really fantastic for boosting that focus and concentration on big test days, especially when the kiddos have those yearly state mandated tests. This is a really great tip to tuck in your back pocket until then. All right, speaking of color, I just want to mention something else. When our kiddos are little, they're often drawn to those really vibrant, loud, oversaturated colors, and they can be incredibly activating. So if this is your little's color wheelhouse, let them relish in those hues in the playroom. And that way you can then make sure that the bedroom is a softer, quieter palette. Not only will that ensure that they're able to rest and sleep at night, but it will give them a refuge and retreat whenever they need some time to calm down, right? So if yours has a playroom or a play space, let all the vibrancy and loud colors and hues live there and go for something a little more muted in the bedroom. Okay, so that's a wrap on our first Q&A sesh. What'd you think? Should we make this a monthly conversation? Because I'm thinking yes. Which means that you might have a question that I would love to answer here. If you do, feel free to email me at amanda@simpleshui.com. And in the subject line, you can put podcast Q. And if you're over on Instagram, you can DM me your question there. Every month, I'll grab 3 questions for us to sink our teeth into here. How does that sound? And a big thank you for all the questions that were submitted for today. I hope you have a few sparks flying now. And if any of you give these suggestions a little elbow grease and have a story to share, send that my way too, because I would love to hear, and with permission, spotlight and celebrate it here. All right. Thanks everyone for listening, and I'll meet you back here next week. And that's our episode, my loves. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to head over to simpleshui.com if you're craving a bigger serving of house love. And if you like what you're hearing, I hope you follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you love what you're learning, will you leave me a review? Your note will totally make my day and help even more people find the show. Have a fabulous day, and I can't wait to meet you back here next week.